Hello, welcome to Ask a Deer Processor. Today we ask, hey Chuck, how do you trim up a back leg?
Now we're going to go ahead and work up a back leg. Any of this area here that was exposed during field dressing, you can see there's bits of leaves and grass and digesta that's on here. We're going to first trim that material off so that we don't have any of that into our meat that we're going to be serving our family. Just take off as thin a layer as you can while still getting the contamination off of there. Start out by, I've got the contamination off, and we're going to start by taking off any fat and muscle that's not going to be a part of our cuts. The anatomy of this back leg is we've got a femur leg bone, main leg bone, running right down at an angle to the kneecap. And you can see the kneecap by this real shiny hard area. So that's where we're going to be cutting from along the femur down to the kneecap. Then we're going to loosen the meat along the lower leg on both sides and cut off the tendon, and then we'll be removing that bone from the leg. So I'm going to take and make a cut right down. I'm feeling the bone that's in there with my knife, come down to the kneecap and cut down to the table. So that's exposed this sirloin tip muscle, and you can see the femur laying right there. Then I'm going to take my knife and run right down the top of the femur, around the joint, run right down the back leg, and I'm going to cut, this area here where we cut the tendon open so we could have a place to hang that. That area is not clean, so I'm going to keep my knife away from that area. Then I'm going to finish down here on the lower leg by just running my knife along the lower leg bone to remove that portion of the shank. This lower portion here is called the shank. You can use the shank as a cut of meat if you choose. It just uses moist heat cookery. You could cut that at that joint right there and save that if you choose. But most of the time, most people, this would go into stew meat or into further processed items like burger or sausage. I'm going to continue by cutting underneath that femur. Remove this shank muscle, turn this around, and then I'm going to cut. I've already got on either side of the leg bone, and I'm just letting my knife run right along the bone, getting that partially loosened. I leave it still attached up here so that I can have this portion kind of holding this bone for me to finish removing any meat that I want to save before throwing this bone into the scrap bin. On the deer leg, just like on a chicken leg, in addition to the big bone, there is a small little kind of pin type of bone that you want to make sure that this thing does not go into your burger or sausage. So be careful laying on right there, starting close to the joint and running down the leg partway is that little pin bone there. We want to make sure that we don't throw that into our burger. And you can spend as much time as you want to trying to get these bones as clean as you want. Once I've got most of the meat off of the leg, I'll go ahead and cut around the head of this femur, getting this leg down. Now, if you want to use the leg bones to make soup stock or give to your dog, it's easy enough to hit between this joint from the lower leg and the upper leg, and then this bone is ready to go. We're now going to separate this leg into the major muscle groups, which is the top round, the bottom round, and the sirloin tip. And we're going to do that by cutting through the connective tissue that is separating those muscle groups. Good sharp knife, pulling those muscles apart. It just kind of lays open there, and you're able to easily cut. All I'm doing is pretty much cutting just connective tissue. I'm not cutting muscle tissue to separate this top round from the rest of it. The shank is likewise, it's just kind of laying in there on the bottom round, and I'm using my hook to kind of pull that muscle away and kind of teasing that loose with my knife. Now I'm going to do the same thing with removing the sirloin tip as I did with the inside leg, just by cutting through connective tissue that's holding that muscle to the rest of the leg. The sirloin tip kind of looks like a little football. What we have left here is the bottom round, and this upper portion here is the sirloin. On a larger deer, you could make some sirloin steaks out of this if you choose, or this could be a nice roast, or it may just go into your trimmings for sausage and burger. Just cut across the top of this muscle group is what we call the bottom round. That separates the sirloin from the bottom round. So the three main muscles that we were talking about getting from the back leg is the inside or top round, the bottom round, and then the sirloin tip. To process the inside or top round for steaks or roasts, I'm going to go ahead and remove this cap muscle, which is laying like would have been on between the legs of that deer. It's just a real thin muscle that lays on the top there. And as you're removing that, the seam kind of follows going right down over the top and down. And you're starting to pick up some other small muscle groups. We're going to trim all that off. And that makes this inside round, very clean, very lean. And this piece is now ready as a roast. It can be cut in half if you need a smaller portion size, or you can go ahead and cut some leg steaks out of this. The top round, the inside leg here, this is a very desirable cut of meat. You can dry heat cook this using dry roasting or frying it or grilling it. It'll still be acceptable because it's the more tender between these other two cuts of meat that we got from the hind leg. In order to cut steaks, we can see the way the muscle fibers run, and we want to make our cut across that grain to make that more palatable when we make our steaks. So we're just going to kind of face that there, and then we're going to cut our leg steaks. You cut them however thick that you want for the type of cooking that you're going to do. If you're going to do, a fast cook method, then you probably, like frying, you'd probably want these pieces of meat to be a little thinner. If you're going to be, grilling them and you kind of want it to medium rare degree of doneness, you may want to cut them a little bit thicker. And by all means, if you're going to use a moist heat cooking, like making a Swiss steak, then you would make these thicker also. So we've got these steaks out of the top round. Okay. The bottom round has a pad of fat associated right where the top of the shank muscles were. We're going to remove that. Even if there's not very much fat there, we are going to remove that piece because inside there is a lymph node that just is not very appetizing looking in a cut of meat if you're going to be serving that to your family. It's perfectly safe to eat, but the lymph system is kind of the filtration system in the body. So if there's any bacteria or infection, that they're going to be associated with that lymph node. So that was just inside this fat, which was laying right here above where the shank was on this bottom round. And we're just going to go ahead and trim up this bottom round, any bits of meat, fat on that. And I'm going to take this real heavy connective tissue off. That was laying between the sirloin tip and the bottom round. And we're going to remove that just by taking our knife, inserting it, and cutting, just trimming that off. This connective tissue has a lot of collagen connective tissue in it. It's a little bit of that material in your sausage is fine. If you've got a grinder that will handle that connective tissue, your sausage will be improved by having a little bit of this collagen in there. But we're going to go ahead and save that, put it in our trimmings. Now we have this bottom round. Sometimes some deer will have a lot of fat here. Some deer will not have a lot of fat. If you want to remove that fat, you can. However, for this particular roast, I'm going to leave a little bit of this fat on there. All I'm going to do is kind of square this up so that it's fairly uniform in thickness so that it cooks evenly. And that would be our bottom round. We generally use this as a roast. You can cut steaks from it if you'd like to by just cutting across perpendicular to this muscle right here. If we were talking about beef, this is the muscle that you call the eye round. We would cut steaks just by cutting along like that. The sirloin tip lends itself very good to being in a roast. You can cut steaks out of it, but when you've pulled it off away from the leg, you've taken all the connective tissue. It kind of came off, stayed on the leg, and the larger leg piece. So this is very clean and does not need any further trimming. I will show you what the steaks look like on this so that you can see why they may not be quite as desirable. The sirloin tip is made up of 3 main muscle groups. It's got some connective tissue that runs in here, but you know, when you're cooking this, these muscles have a tendency to want to separate. So if you like leg steaks better than you do roast, by all means you can cut steaks out of it, but they're just not as good as what you would get from the top round, or inside round as it's also called. Generally use moist heat cooking for the bottom round as well as the sirloin tip.
Thanks again to Riverbend Wild Game and Sausage Company. You can learn more about Illinois Learn to Hunt at learntohuntil.com.